Good day everyone. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 17, The Virtue of Justice. Before we discuss this topic, let me introduce our group, the discussants. I am Glyzzle Cyvie Moradas, and I am going to introduce justice and its characteristics and theories. Cecille Monsing is going to discuss the classifications of justice, and Elmira Geverola is going to discuss John Rawls' concept of justice as fairness. The learning outcomes of this topic are: after the discussion, the students should be able to define justice and describe its characteristics, identify the theories of justice, describe the classification of justice, and clarify the concept of justice as fairness. So, what is justice? The term justice is derived from the Latin word jus, meaning right. Justice means to accord each person what he or she deserves, or to give each person his or her due. Thus, it is depicted by the symbol of Lady Justice, a woman blindfolded with a set of scales, typically suspended from one hand and carrying a sword on the other hand. Thus, this symbol represents authority, fairness, equality, and impartiality, implying that justice should be applied regardless of wealth, power, or status. To further contextualize, justice signifies fidelity to the law and perfect observance of the divine precepts. Justice is the firm and constant will to give to each person his or her due. In the Roman Catholic tradition, it is known as the moderation between selfishness and selflessness. Justice disposes one to respect the rights of the others and to establish harmonious human relationships that promote equity for the common good. Thus, the just person, often mentioned in the sacred scriptures, is distinguished by habitual right thinking and the uprightness of his or her conduct toward his or her neighbor. So this is Karl Peschke, and in his book Christian Ethics, Peschke explains that justice is a much invoked claim and virtue. All humans appeal to justice and demand justice. Diba kay kita murag mga itag justice every time nga na may tabo sa tuwa or na may tabong dili maayo. So, justice is the familiar model virtue, sometimes in the sense of a social norm, more often with its scope so enlarged as to extend to the total observance of all the commandments of God. So, Peschke lists 3 characteristics of justice. A. Justice is a social norm that is a directive for guiding humans in their actions toward one another. So, parang naging guide na siya sa atin para gumawa ng tama or to know what to do after something bad happened. Justice is approbative in the sense that judging in action to be just manifest approval of that action. And justice is obligatory in the sense that judging a certain course of action to be just entails that a person in a similar situation ought to do the same thing. In addition to the characteristics of justice, Peschke draws on the following theories of justice. So here are the positive law theory, social good theory, and natural right theory. So, positive law theory defines justice as conformity to the law and thereby reduces the just to the legal. Justice cannot be identical with legality since it transcends it and is its critical measure. Social good theory defines justice as doing what is useful for the social good. In other words, justice obliges a person to do what promotes the social good. Natural right theory holds that the natural right is the ultimate basis of justice. One has rights not primarily because he or she has received them from society, but because his or her nature as a human being confers rights upon him or her. Accordingly, the rights are to be respected by justice are primarily derived from the laws inherent in nature itself. Justice is further characterized by certain properties which it owes to the fact that it demands basic and essential requirements for the existence and development of humans and society. So here are the three properties of justice. Accordingly, the demands of justice in principle are enforceable. The demands of justice are of definite and determinable nature, at least as a rule. And violated claims of justice and principle demand restitution or at least compensation if the damage inflicted cannot be repaired.
Hello everyone, I am Cecille Monsing, and today I am going to discuss all about the classification of justice. So, as we all know, justice is defined as corrective action that is executive according to the requirements of the law. It is possible that some of the laws that guard justice are rooted in the norms and social consensus of a group. However, regardless of the origin of the laws, justice ensures compliance with them and the fair treatment of all individuals. So the issues addressed by justice are of different kinds. So there are different types of justice to deal with them. So each has important implications in the way a nation's judiciary operates. So in this way, justice affects the relations of all the states of the world in political, socio-economic, civil, and criminal terms. Each type seeks to regulate the way people interact with one another within societies. Thus, if a person does not act prudently, he will be tried with the help of one of the forms of justice. So there are 10 classification or types of justice that people can appeal to if they feel that their physical, moral, or emotional integrity has been violated. First is the attributive justice. Next is procedural justice, proportional justice, social justice, retributive justice, compensatory justice, commutative or contractual justice, contributive justice, restorative justice, and lastly, the distributive justice. So first, we are going to discuss the attributive justice. Attributive justice renders to every person what is his or her rights and attributes to him or her what he or she really is. So, attributive justice is justice as recognition. It attributes to beings what they are and can claim to be. So, it recognizes and respects the humanity and autonomy of fellows. Hence, for example, respect integrity of cultural heritage and recognize their rights to decide what is done with their own heritage. So next is procedural justice. Procedural justice is concerned with making and implementing decisions according to fair procedures that ensure fair treatment. So, procedural justice is concerned with making and implementing decisions according to fair processes that ensure fair treatment. So arbiters should make sure that their decision-making criteria are unbiased and are applied in a consistent and reliable way. So this makes it easier for parties to accept the arbitrary solution, even if it is one that rules against them. Procedural justice is one that is concerned with take decisions and implement what is derived from them fairly, ensuring that all individuals receive the treatment they deserve. According to this type of justice, the rules must be followed by all individuals impartially and consistently in order to be able to process them without any bias in case they commit some rudeness. Those responsible for procedural justice should be impartial. On the other hand, people prosecuted for this type of justice must have some type of representation to be able to intercede in the decision-making process. An example of this is public participation in local government instances when a decision is made that can affect citizens. So if people feel that the decision-making process is being taken fairly, they will be more likely to accept what is decided, even if they do not agree with it. However, the implementation of fair processes is a well-discussed issue since any decision must always include negotiation, mediation, or arbitration and adjudication of what is decided, and this is not always an easy task. Third is the proportional justice. This justice renders to every person what is his or her due by right, what he or she does not yet own, but what he or she is entitled to receive as a remuneration, compensation, or benefit, or what he or she is also obliged to accept as a burden in the service of the community. So, proportional justice is this principle indicates rewarding people in proportion to the scale and the quality of their effort. So it is just to reward different jobs differently on the basis of efforts and skills required and the danger involved. So thus proportionality provides a balance to the principle of equal treatment. The reward and compensation, for example, the reward and compensation for a surgeon and an architect varies according to the skill that is required in their job. While in the criminal law, the principle of proportional justice is used to describe the idea that the punishment of a certain crime should be in proportion to the severity of the crime itself. In practice, systems of law differ greatly on the application of this principle. On the other hand, in self-defense cases, the amount of force employed by the defender must be proportionate to the 310 aggressive force. If deadly force is used to defend against non-deadly force, the harm inflicted by the actor, death or serious bodily harm, will be greater than the harm avoided or less than serious bodily harm. Even if deadly force is proportionate, its use must be necessary. Otherwise, unlawful conduct will only be justified when it involves the lesser harm of two harmful choices. If countering with non-deadly force or with no force at all avoids the threatened harm, defensive use of deadly force is no longer the lesser evil of only two choices. So alternatives involving still less societal harm are available. Next is the social justice. This social justice refers to the economic welfare of social groups wherein it demands proportionate share for the social partners in the fruits of their economic cooperation. So social justice. Social justice recognizes the fact that we are all members of the same human race or family, and that everyone must contribute his or her own quota for the attainment of the common good of the whole. So every member of the society must be responsible and conscious of his actions. So it is required that all citizens should contribute their own quota in terms of duties and responsibilities for the attainment of the common good of society. And then all members of the society should develop a sense of responsibility and consider effectively that repercussions or consequences of their actions and way of life on others. And also, they should behave in such a manner as to ensure an equitable distribution of the resources of society. All members of the society should pool the resources and efforts, both physical and mental, in the realization of the development of projects. The society also should not permit the accumulation of the resources of the community in the hands of a few. And finally, there should be the spirit of cooperation among the various nations of the world as a great human family. So this call to mind that humanity should mobilize and employ all its resources of raw materials, capital, manpower, and technology to ensure that no region or sub-region of the world is enjoying while the rest remain in abject poverty. Next classification is retributive justice. So this justice is the just imposition of punishments and penalties on those guilty of performing wrongful acts. So retributive justice, which is grounded in the notions of merit and desert. So the central idea of retributive justice is that the aggressor tends to gain an unfair advantage through his behavior and therefore should be punished to balance the situation. In other words, those who do not follow the rules must be brought before justice and must suffer the consequences of their acts. The notion of deterring people from committing certain crimes is also an important idea for retributive justice. Thus, it is believed that in setting forth the kind of punishment that may be received for violating the law is sufficient to dissuade the person from committing such offense. And in addition to retributive justice, it is not only responsible for ensuring compliance with local, state or national laws. It also plays a fundamental role in the enforcement of international laws. This is how it must respond for the fulfillment of human rights and punish war crimes, among others. Sixth classification is compensatory justice. So this justice is just way of compensating people for what they lost as a result of wrongful actions done to them. So compensatory justice refers to the extent to which people are fairly compensated for their injuries by those who have injured them. So just compensation is proportional to the loss inflicted on a person. This is precisely the kind of justice that is at stake in debates over damage to workers' health in coal mines. Some argue that mine owners should compensate the workers whose health has been ruined. Others argue that workers voluntarily took on this risk when they choose employment in the mines. Next is the commutative justice. Commutative justice or contractual justice directs that the exchange of goods and services takes place according to strict equality values. So this is the strictest branch of justice which regulates the contractual relationship, exchanges, business, and commercial activities among individuals or between one community or company with another. So it regulates contracts, agreements, engagements, commercial and business undertakings, sales, labors, jobs, and wages on the basis of strict sense of what is fixed. So much is promised and so much must be paid or repaid, no more, no less. Judicial decisions or verdict on any branch of commutative justice must be passed without consideration to rank, class, sex, religion, tribe, or ignorance of the law because it places the principle of the rule of law for everybody. So commutative justice measures the mutual exchanges between persons in society. As such, it requires an honoring of promises and fulfilling of contracts freely agreed to by two or more parties. Commutative justice not only involves the obligations people enter into toward one another but also the full range of moral principles. Unjust or immoral characters are not binding. Taking advantage of others, even if the practice is not illegal, is an infraction against what we owe one another in commutative justice. So licit agreements respect individual rights and private property. They pledge us to repay debts, deliver goods promised, perform service as specified, and do all this at the right time and place. Furthermore, commutative justice requires restitution of goods stolen or otherwise improperly acquired and reparation for any harm done. So restitution is an obligation not only of the person who wrongly acquired the goods in the first instance, but of anyone who knowingly benefits along the way from the misappropriation. Another classification of justice is contributive justice. Contributive justice obliges the members of the society to comply with the demands of the common good or the general good of the community. Contributive justice offers a different way of approaching the issue of equal opportunity. As its name suggests, contributive justice is concerned with ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity to make some kind of social contribution. So it derives from the Aristotelian notion that what we do in life is as important as what we get in terms of our overall quality of life and well-being. So it is important to note that any support for a progressive notion of contributive justice should be seen as distinct from endorsing the conservative idea that people must feel obliged or be forced into work or employment. One that assumes people's primary social contribution is to give their labor power in service of surplus value production, while in most societies there exists a social requirement and strong moral compulsion to sell one's labor and material necessity make some kind of paid work inevitable for most. The idea of contributive justice focuses less on coercion or enforced labor and more on realizing the potential for self-development and positive social contributions through a collective workful effort. So next is the restorative justice. Restorative justice holds the offender accountable for the harm that he or she has caused and to make reparation. So restorative justice, while comparing to retributive justice, It focuses on punishing the transgressor of the norm. Restorative justice focuses on ensuring the welfare of the victim. So, in this sense, many people are more supportive of restorative justice over retribution, as it focuses on restoring well being and tranquility to a punctual individual rather than to a nation. So, restorative justice is concerned with the healing or concerned with healing the wounds of the victims as well as for making lawbreakers have to adhere to compliance. So essentially seeking to repair the damage done to interpersonal relationships and community. So in this type of justice, the victims play a fundamental role in the direction of justice, indicating what should be the responsibilities and obligations of those who transgress the law. On the other hand, transgressors are encouraged to understand the harm they have done to their victims and the reasons why they should be held responsible for such harm. And restorative justice seeks to balance relationships within a community and prevent certain harmful situations from happening in the future. The national level, this kind of processes are handled through mediation programs between victims and offenders. On the other hand, at the international level, restorative justice is usually a matter of institutionalizing truth through reconciliation commissions. And finally, the distributive justice. So, distributive justice is equitable distribution of benefits, rights, and socioeconomic goods and burdens in the community according to proportional equality. So, this means distributive justice is concerned with giving all members of society a fair share of the benefits and resources available. So, arbiters can play a key role in making sure that resources are allocated fairly. Distributive justice is also known as economic justice. It is concerned with giving all members of society what is just. That is, it ensures that each individual has access to the resources he or she needs to lead a dignified life. In this sense, distributive justice is understood as that which is responsible for equitably distributing wealth. However, while many people agree that wealth must be equitably distributed, there are many disagreements on this issue. So this happens because it is difficult to determine how much should be given to each individual to be fair. Some criteria that seek to clarify this issue are those of equity, equality, and necessity, where equity means that the reward given to an individual is equivalent to the work that he invested to obtain it, while equality means that all people must be get the same amount of something regardless of their contribution. And need, on the other hand, means that the people who need the most need to receive more, and those who need less must receive less. The fair distribution of resources or distributive justice is essential to preserve the stability of societies and the well-being of their members. When this is not executed correctly, multiple conflicts can be unleashed. So that is the classification of justice.
Good day, everyone. My name is Elmira Geverola, and I will be the one to discuss the John Rawls concept of justice as fairness. So, in his work, A Theory of Justice, Rawls' concept of justice as fairness describes as a set of principles and structures in a society that promotes fairness. So, the Rawls concept of justice as fairness, mo ni siya ang prinsipyo o kabuuan sa isa ka society nga nag-promotes og fairness. So, when we say fairness is patas ang treatment. So, ginaga-focus siya sa kanang prinsipyo o ganang kabuuan sa isa ka society nga naghatag og patas nga treatment sa matag usa. Syempre sa matag usa. So, according to Rawls, justice as fairness consists of two main principles, namely the liberty principles and the equality principles. So, first, we will discuss the liberty principle. So, the liberty principle suggests that everyone has a claim to basic liberties and rights. So, liberty principles, dili naga-focus siya nga kitang tanan, na atay rights. We have to claim that we have the rights. Syempre, naaman jud na siya sa tuang law, diba? That everyone have the rights to remain silent or everything we do, we have the rights. Second is the equality principle. Suggests that human beings are equal and that they ought to be treated equally. So, diri sa equality principle, diri kay ginasuggest ng kitang tanan nga tao. Yes, kitang tanan. We are all equal. So when we say equal, pantay-pantay, in the same measure or the same extent, pantay tang tanan. We should be treated equally, whether we are rich or poor, whether we have natay mga physical disabilities. We should be treated equally, diba? So naman di kalahian ang fair. There are difference between fair and equally. When we say fair, it's the patas without discrimination or favoritism. And when we say equally, is pantay-pantay. Dapat pantay-pantay tang tanan. In the same measure or in the same extent. So, pantay-pantay ta. So, kung sa liberty, we have the rights in everything. In liberty, natay rights. And there is equally, dapat pantay-pantay ang treatment sa tuwa, whether rich or poor ta. Sabot. Understood, student? Next is equality principle. Fair equality of opportunity. Fair equality of opportunity requires that citizens with the same talents and willingness to use them have the same educational and economic opportunities regardless of whether they were born rich or poor. So, sa fair equality of opportunity, so, ginapromote jud diri nga whether we came from a rich family or poor family, dapat is equal ang education nga tuang madawat. Based sa tuang willingness o sa tuang talents. Diba? Kaya naman gay ban ispilahan nga. Diba naman gay private and public schools. So, dapat ang education is pantay lang. Muna ang ginapromote dili sa fair equality of opportunity. Dapat pantay-pantay ang tanan. Walay inequality nga mahitabo sa education. As long as kanang willing ka mo eskwela or unsa, diba? Dapat yun siya pantay-pantay. Next is the difference principle. Regulates the distribution of wealth and income, and also allows the inequalities of wealth and income, so as long as this will be the everyone's advantage, specifically to the advantage of those who will be worse off. So, unlike sa fair equality of opportunity, ang difference principle kay nagabase jud siya sa status sa pamilya sa isa ka tao, sa rich or whether dato ba siya or pobre. Yes. This will be everyone's advantage. But I think lahi man jud ang treatment. So I think lahi man jud ang treatment sa katao sa kung mahibaw-an nila nga tao kay dato or pobre, diba? As we all notice, man jud na siya, mas lamang jud ang dato kaysa sa pobre. Maski sa when we seek for justice, mas always jud na lamang ang dato. So, kung nakabantay ta pag artista ang ma-rape or unsa kanang naa sila issues, di ba? Kay dali kay mukalat ang mga news. Unlike sa mga pobre nga wala gani kasagaran na news na nahitabo. Ana siya ka unfair, di ba? So I think walay advantage dili sa different principle is walay joy makita nga advantage ang pobre diri. So more on sa dato jud ni. More on sa dato jud ni siya. Sa dato jud ni siya mapanig kay ano man gud kanang mas dali jud makita sa mga dato ang justice kung sila na ang muligo kaysa sa pobre. And ang uban gani kay nagabuhat sila mali against sa mga poor people. Pero nga kabalo na gud ang kanang kabalo na ang kanang pamahalaan na sila ang mali pero sila gihapon ang gipaniga because they are rich, unlike poor people walay kwarta nga ikahatag, diba? Luoy kaayo. So I guess the generous concept of justice as fairness is jud siya kanang mas dapat jud siya i-promote sa tuang society, the liberty principle, the equality principle, the fair equality of opportunity. So kailangan jud siyang i-promote sa tuang society karon. And I think the difference principle is pa siya kanang I think dili kay siya kanang dapat kanang highly discourage kay kita manguntanan dapat is fair. We should be fair and equal. We should accept, we should be treated equally and fairly, di ba? Panang wala siya bias na mahitabo. So that, because we are human, and ma-feel man po nato kung sakit po sa tuang part na kanang ma-mistreat, dili kanang mataga maka-feel tag equal treatment. Lain po na siya sa tuang part, di ba? So, I guess everyone should be treated equally and fairly. So that would be all. Thank you and good morning.